How's it going, everyone? Just making sure this is all getting started. It's getting recording for us. All right, cool. Hey, everyone. My name is Ben Jacobson. I am the digital marketing strategist for Page One Power here in Boise, Idaho. Today, we're back with episodes 2 of SEO from home, and we have a whole bunch more guests lined up for you guys in the upcoming days. Again, with this series, our goal is to bring the industry some interesting, hopefully helpful content to continue to hone your SEO while you guys are working from home. Our goal is to do these weekly for the foreseeable future, so we hope you guys will join us for the future episodes as well. Next week, we'll be talking with Garrett Mergut, who is the CEO of Directive, and we're going to talk about changing your mindset during uncertain times. Super pertinent right now. We hope you guys will join us for that. If you guys want to check out last week's stream, we were talking with Michael Johnson, who is the sales manager here at Page One Power. If you guys want to check that out, that is up on our website or, of course, on all of our social media. However, today's guest we have joining us is Charles Taylor. He's a friend of Page One Power, contributor to Pages Magazine, and SEO for Verizon Fios. Charles put together a presentation for you guys today about the importance the important do's and don'ts of site migration and how to make that process go as smoothly as possible. We are going to be recording today's webinar as well, so if you guys want to check that out at a later date, we'll typically have that up later today. We're going to have Q&A options available for the stream. You guys can type those in. We'll do our best to get to everyone's questions as they come in. However, sometimes with how the presentation goes, we may have to address those questions towards the end. We're also going to be live tweeting today's stream, so if you guys would like to participate, be sure to use the hashtag SEO from home and tag at Charles H. Taylor and at Page One Power. We're excited to have Charles with us here today. Charles, thanks for being here. I'll let you take over from here.
Great, thank you very much for inviting me today. Today I'm going to talk about a fun subject, SEO and site migrations. So this can be quite a scope. This can be anywhere from changing an individual page name to a directory to moving from one site to the other. And there's lots involved in it. So hopefully everybody will learn a lot. I have the chat window and the question and answer window open here. So feel free to throw questions at me. If I don't answer them, it's because I'm either about to get to them or I feel like it takes a little bit of time to address them at the end. So I'll be doing that. So first, introduce myself. My name's Charles Taylor. I'm the SEO manager at Verizon. I've been there for about 4 years now. I've been in SEO for a while, since early 2000s. I kind of call myself a search nerd. My 2 favorite subjects. You can always ask me anything you want about SEO or Star Wars. I like them both. And I can usually be found pretty easily on LinkedIn and Twitter and Google. But you always got to include the SEO after my name on Google, because if you just Google Charles Taylor, you're going to find a different Charles Taylor, and he's not nearly as nice as I am. So there you go. An overview. So put a little fun meme in here. One doesn't simply migrate a website. Migrations can be scary. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk first, spend a little time talking about the bad migrations I've seen, the typical migrations, good migrations, and really the great migrations. And that's my goal, is to help you go from bad migrations to great migrations. We're going to talk a little about the purpose of SEO, just to make sure everybody's level set. We'll talk about the site cleanup process, finding all the URLs so that you can migrate, and best practices when building a new website. So site migrations can go wrong, and here's a couple great examples. The first being youre.com. They went from HTTP to HTTPS a few years ago, and they hurt their site. And I've seen this happen on sites before. What should have been a very simple migration wasn't a simple migration. The search engines don't always understand what it is you're trying to do. Here's another example of a site that was an e-commerce site. They were going along just perfectly, nothing was a problem, and then they decided to change their CMS system, which of course changed all their URLs, and you can see what it did to their organic search. It absolutely killed their organic search, and it took them years to recover, and I'm not even 100% sure they ever really properly recovered. So that's a big warning. Sometimes folks will tell me, oh, well, we're a big organization, so we don't have to worry. Google can't afford not to have us in their index. I wouldn't really use that as an SEO strategy. That's a little bit dangerous. Here's a great example of a large organization. Royal.gov.uk moved over to royal.uk. And as you can see, they tried changing domains. They did not do a redirection strategy. They did not have a good SEO strategy, and they absolutely lost all their organic traffic. So the idea that big organizations are immune and they can do whatever they want, that's not accurate. And just to be clear, I'm not throwing shade at other websites here. This is an example of my own website. I have had not so perfect migrations in my past. And here was one where a team decided it had to be migrated. I gave them our list of what needed to be done. They came back and said, well, what's the minimum we need to do? I don't know how many SEOs are out there that get that question. What's the minimum SEO we need to do? And I was kind of talking like, well, there is no minimum. This is what we need to do. The decision was made that it just had to be done immediately, and we'll fix the SEO later. And as we can see, that we got hammered, and it took us months and months to repair that traffic loss. And quite honestly, you know, it hasn't come back. And it was as simple. We just didn't redirect all the URLs. That's all that needed to be done, and it wasn't done. So let's not focus on the negative. Let's talk about the positive. Let's talk about how a migration should go, because that's the first question I almost always get is, all right, you do a migration. We've always heard you should expect some kind of dip, and that is true. You should expect some kind of dip. But the question is always, how much of a dip and how long? Well, about 2 years ago, we did a migration. I did a migration with a support section of a website. The CMS was changed, the URL structure was changed. As a matter of fact, a lot was changed. They had about 5,000 URLs, and they brought it down to about 300, 350 pages. So that's a big change. I was very nervous about this migration. And this is what I would call a typical migration. We consolidated pages down, and I'll talk later about how sometimes getting rid of pages is necessary. A great example in this support was that they had Netscape Navigator support pages, which obviously no one's using Netscape Navigator anymore. By the way, if anyone is using Netscape Navigator, I'd be interested to know, put it in the chat or question, or let me know, because I'm just curious. But yeah, it's not used anymore. We don't need it in our support, so we could get rid of pages like that. We redirected everything that made sense to redirect, and it took us about 4 months. You can see there was a dip, a very clear dip, about a 20% dip, and then it recovered back, and we kept going along very nicely after that. So I would call this a typical migration, a 4 to 6 month recovery period. That's what you should plan. A good migration. So I was SEO for a website, and we had to do a HTTP to HTTPS migration. We really had zero impact. As you can see on the chart there was about a 1 week where there was a little bit of a dip, and then we bounced right back without a problem. And that, honestly, that was right around the middle of July, so that could have just been people going on vacation. So that was great. I'll give you a little hint. The secret to this migration was all about setting up our canonical tags ahead of time. I'll talk about that later, but this HTTP to HTTPS went very, very smoothly because we used the power of the canonical before even doing any kind of redirecting. So a good migration, here was a website. Excuse the crooked red line I had there. I didn't freehand it as well as I thought I was going to, but we did a migration. It was in April of last year, I believe it was. A CMS system was changed. So this is data out of Search Console, and you can see the impressions and the clicks didn't change at all. And really the key to this migration was that the CMS system changed, but the URL structure didn't have to change. So I was very adamant with the team, keep the URL structure alive. As long as we're keeping the URL structure the same, as far as Google is concerned, nothing changed. It was just a back-end change. So migrations can be front-end and back-end. And here was a great example of a back-end change that didn't have to affect the front end. And that's why we just sailed right through it. And here to pat myself on the back a little bit, here was a great migration we did. This was a lot of things changed. CMS changed, the top level directory changed. We went from a small business directory to just a simple business directory. And we even were bringing in another website. So we were migrating a second website into our website for this migration. As you can see, this is an impressions chart out of Search Console. You can see that the old directory, we slowly lost impressions as Google was dropping the pages from the index, and then we slowly gained impressions for the new directory. And the reason I call it a great migration is that when you look at the aggregate of the impressions, we actually gained, and we kept gaining. So we not only sailed through the migration, but we did better from day one. We may have had maybe a 1 or 2 week blip, but it was really imperceivable to the traffic of the website. And that's our goal. Our goal is to have a great migration. So the question is always, all right, so what do you do? How do you get a great migration? It's easy to say. We're going to talk about that a little bit. I always like to level set on the purpose of SEO. SEO is about making your site more crawlable, indexable, and rankable so that we can drive more traffic, leads, and sales. Traffic, leads, and sales are the KPIs and should always be your KPI when running any website. So you'll hear people talk about rankings. I use impressions as a great barometer, and those are just that. They're barometers. Rankings, impressions are all barometers. We want traffic, leads, and conversions. That's our goal. That's our KPIs. So how do we do that? I try to take a very structured approach to my SEO overall. So this is my SEO system, and you'll see that when we do a migration, pretty much all these things are touched. We want to worry about the accessibility of the website to the bots, meaning the technical issues. We want to make sure that the content, all the page content, is relevant. We have to make sure the website has authority. That means links coming in from other websites to your website. And then, of course, quality metrics. There's some debate about whether exactly what user metrics will help you rank. And I think those are fair and good debates to have. There's some that I'm not so sure are good for. Let's take something simple like bounce rate. There's a lot of argument about whether bounce rate really affects your rankings or not. My position is, even if it doesn't affect my rankings, increasing the bounce rate to my website, or I should say decreasing the bounce rate from my website, it's not going to hurt us. You're not throwing money down a well, down a black hole. It's still going to help your overall site, even if it doesn't help your SEO. So the first thing you do before you want to do a migration, so always get your SEOs involved as early as possible. Once you think you're going to do migration, you've been playing with the idea of doing a migration, let your SEO team know. The first thing they should be doing is cleaning up your website. Now, hopefully the website doesn't have too many problems, but maybe you haven't had a chance to do this. It's not fun. It's a lot of technical issues. It can be a bit of a pain, quite honestly. So you want to make sure that if you're not doing this regularly, you do spend a good 4 to 6 weeks cleaning up all of your issues before the migration. And issues everywhere is from making sure you have up-to-date HTML, XML sitemaps, making sure you're fixing all your bad links, 404s, redirect chains, make sure you don't have a lot of soft 404s, any bad or missing canonicals, title tags either missing or too long or too short, same with meta descriptions, any bad site architecture, multiple H1s, and clean up all this stuff as much as you can. Make your site as easy for the website to crawl ahead of time as possible. You want to find every URL on your site. So my fellow SEOs out there are going to recognize, oh, that's Screaming Frog. I love Screaming Frog, so shout out to the folks there. Use this as a great tool to build, and there are other good tools out there, but Screaming Frog's the one I use. Use this to find every URL on your website. So what I'll typically do is I will crawl my site. I will then check my analytics. I'll get every URL using from a crawl. I'll then check, pull all the URLs that are getting traffic via my analytics platform, whether that's Google Analytics, Adobe, whoever you're using. I'll also use things like Google Search Console and Bing Webmaster Tool, pull a huge list of URLs, compile it down, dedupe, and now I have my list of all the URLs that are out there that are getting organic traffic that I need to be aware of. So once you have this list, you need to have a little bit of a heart-to-heart with yourself and your webmasters and find out, what do you need to keep? What do you keep? What do you redirect? And what do you kill and delete? There are times to do each. There are pros and cons for each of those. So keeping the existing URL, if you'll remember the one chart I showed where we had a CMS system was changing, but I insisted the front-end URLs don't change. Well, that was the best of all worlds. We did a migration, no URLs changed. So SEO, as far as the bots were concerned, no big deal. As far as users were concerned, nothing changed. So it was really the best of all worlds. 301 redirects, most of the time you're not going to be able to do that. So 301 redirects are going to be the tool you're going to use. You want to do a one-for-one redirect for all of your pages from your old site to your new site or old directory to new directory. The downsides to 301s is there is a little loss of the link equity and authority. It's just going to happen. It's better that than the alternative. You want to be careful that you're not building redirect chain. So if you had A going to B, you do not want to have A, B, and then C, where there's 3 hops or 4 hops or 5 hops. First of all, the search engines will only follow so many hops. Last time I heard it was like 4 hops, 5 hops, I think is the maximum they'll follow. So you don't want any of those because it hurts you from an SEO point of view. And also the logistics. The more hops you have in a chain, in a redirect chain, the more chances there are of something breaking. So you always want a 1-for-1 if you're going to do 3-1 redirects. And then sunset, kill, or 404 the page, or sometimes you'll hear people say you should 410 the page. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. The problem you'll find is if you just allow 404 pages in mass, pages that are necessary, pages that are important, that's going to be bad for both SEOs and users. There are times where you will want to 404 a page, allow it to 404. And my great example was the support pages. We had a Netscape Navigator page, support page. We didn't need that. It can go away. It's not, even though we did lose some traffic from that page, it's okay. It doesn't hurt our website. It doesn't hurt the traffic, leads, and conversions that we're really after. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about, well, what is, I mentioned, I'm sorry, I kind of mentioned 404 and then 410. Just kind of threw them out there. A 404 is a page not found. A 410 is a slightly different designation to the search bot. It's saying page not found, and it's never coming back. So you're essentially telling the search engine, don't come back and look at this again. A 404 page, the search engine will typically keep coming back to that page, seeing if it returns a better status. Whereas a 410, it'll be less likely to come back over and over and over again once it gets that message repeatedly. So redirects. Let's talk about redirects. I talked a little about 404s and 410s. Whenever you do a redirect, you want to do a 301 redirect. It's called a 301 redirect. You tell your server folks or your website folks, I want a 301 redirect from the old page to the new page. 301 redirects are important. They're a status code that the search engines understand. They're essentially saying this page is permanently moving and it's not going back to the old page. You'll sometimes hear people use the term 302 redirect. That's essentially telling the search engine this is a temporary redirect. You don't want temporary redirects. This is a permanent redirect. This is a migration. So a few things you'll run into with redirects, both in your cleanup and when setting up migrations. You want to have what I call a single hop redirect. You don't want multiple redirects. So the first one in that list is a great example of a multi-hop redirect. Search engines will only follow so many hops. Eventually, they'll stop following hops. You'll lose a little bit of authority at each individual hop. So the more hops you have, the more authority you lose. And then just practically for logistics purposes, there's a chance of it breaking, something in that chain breaking. And once one point breaks, everything will be broken. You want to make sure that you don't have any broken redirects. So when you set up redirects from site A to site B, you got to check them. You got to make sure they're working. You want to make sure that the redirects don't go to dead pages. So the redirect may be working fine, but it's going to a page that doesn't exist. So you have to make sure that's redirecting to a page that's alive. And if you use a crawler like Screaming Frog, that page should return a 200 status. 200 status is the status that us SEOs are looking for. That's the everything's fine, everything's working great. So the goal is that single hop redirect from page A to page B, one hop using a 301 status code, and then that's the easiest for the search engines to process. And it's also going to give yourself less problems and less things to worry about. So when building the site, that's how you keep from having problems. But we want to grow our SEO. We want to make it better. So we want to build our new site with SEO in mind. So always think about site architecture. It should be simple to use, easy to navigate, easy to understand. Your design folks this is where the design folks and the SEO folks should just be working together and really be speaking the same language, saying let's make a simple site architecture. Some people will argue about having multiple levels of directories versus everything at a flat. I'm not a big fan of either one. I don't see one as being significantly better than the other. You do what makes the most sense for you. The key is it has to be easy for users and the search engines to find the pages. You don't want orphan pages. You don't want these link chains where they have to keep clicking and clicking and clicking to find the important pages. All your important pages should be easy to find. They should be preferably on your main nav or at the very least your footer nav. You want to obviously optimize all your pages. So I always talk about optimization zones whenever looking at a page. So this is an older image from Moz. I borrowed it from Moz. And so for optimizing for auto repair, there's all different kinds of places you can place it. You can put it in your alt tags for images, obviously in your content, in your headlines, in your URL, your title tags. Those are all the major optimization zones. It's not about shoving keywords every place, but it is about making sure that you are properly optimized. Often, when you're talking about optimizations of the page, the subject of content length will come up. There's a lot of debates. I don't want to say that content length is unimportant, because I mean, you're looking at a great chart here from SEMrush. This was a ranking factors report, probably from 2017, but honestly, I can guarantee it looks exactly the same in 2020 as it probably did in 2005, 2010. The pages with the most content typically get the most traffic. My belief system is that it's nothing magical about the amount of content on the page. From everything I've tested and tried, it's less about the amount of content. Granted, you do need content on your page so the search engine can bite into it. It's really about folks that have a lot of content on the page have a tendency to have either implicitly or just by accident optimized their page. They either have explicitly optimized their page, or they've optimized their page just because they have so much content on there, it's naturally optimized. So here's kind of what I'm diving into. So when you have page content, it all begins with the content on the page. The old style of SEO, and here's another great example from Moz, where they had, if you want to rank for dog photos, you just jam that word dog photos in over and over and over again, and then you'd rank. And while, yeah, you have to have important keywords on the page, and sometimes you do have to make sure the keywords on the page a certain number of times. There is a density keyword frequency factor involved, but it's more important to develop the site's what I call topical depth and breadth. Google is picking the keywords out of the page. You need to make sure that you're building a deeper layer of what I call semantic meaning, or what's called semantic meaning. It's just a fancy way of saying words that imply other words. Let's use a simple example. If I say the word plant, what am I referring to? Like a bush or a tree? Or am I referring to a manufacturing plant? Or am I referring to a spy within the organization? Just the word plant and putting the word plant 100 times on a page isn't going to optimize that page better. But if I say to you the words Ford Motor Company, Detroit, Michigan, automatically you know what I'm talking about. I haven't said anything else. You know that when I say the word plant, I mean a manufacturing plant, and specifically an auto manufacturing plant. And so that's really what I'm talking about when I talk about give your content a deeper semantic meaning. It's just not about using variations of the keyword or related terms or various synonyms. It's about what are words that would naturally come up in any conversation about that subject. That's what I mean about giving a deeper meaning. Google is definitely getting much, much better at identifying, understanding entities and understanding what pages are about. So you want to make sure by having these other words, some folks will ask me, do you mean LSI? I don't want to say LSI specifically because they're probably not using LSI in particular, but it's a very similar type of feature in the sense that these are words that explain the topic you're discussing. Page hierarchy, obviously important. It constantly comes out. I saw some emails or some tweets recently from John Mueller saying it's not important. If you have read back pages of Pages magazine, I've run some tests on this. You can definitely do it wrong and right. It's definitely an optimization zone. You definitely want to make sure your keywords are on in these header tags. So I recommend just following best practices. It also makes it easier for people to read. Title tags and meta descriptions, those are still vital. Title tag, clearly Google's reading the title tag. I actually had another article in the Pages magazine where it talked about title tags, and Google's reading your title tags. Google's pulling keywords out of your title tags, so make sure you use it. There's some debate about whether Google's using meta descriptions or not. I've seen some tests that suggest it may be using meta descriptions or it's a very, very minor factor. So I would still optimize it, but I would really more optimize it for clicks, but make sure you're using the keywords in your meta description. Because one thing I have noticed is something we've all kind of run into is Google will rewrite our title tags or our meta descriptions. Based on the studies I've done some tests. I've also watched my own websites. And the title tag sometimes gets rewritten because it's too close to other ranking pages on that search page. And Google will pick yours to be the one that's rewritten. So that's a little disturbing, a little annoying. The meta description, though, it seems to be simply that Google's looking for the search query in the meta description. And if you're not using the search query in the meta description, Google will then grab the content out of your page that contains that search query. So just make sure you optimize that meta description, make sure the queries, the important queries are in that meta description, optimize it around click, you should be good. URL best practices. Obviously, you can't build a website without doing URL best practices. Keep it simple. Try to keep it as simple as possible. I realize this example probably isn't the simplest example of the URL I could have picked, but you can look at this URL and I don't have to read the page. I know what page this is about. This is vacation packages at Disneyland specifically. So that's really my point to the URL, is just make sure it's descriptive. I wouldn't panic too much about the length of the URL or how deep your directory structure is. It just needs to be very clear and organized. My general rules are I always use lowercase. I've burned myself making uppercase URLs, so don't do what I did. Don't make uppercase, just lowercase everything. No special characters. I would only use dashes or hyphens to separate words. I've also found in testing that Google doesn't parse words. So let's take this example. If vacation packages was one word, Google doesn't always parse that properly. It doesn't always know that you have a word vacation you have the phrase vacation packages. It sees it as one word and may not always read it. So I always recommend parsing, separating all of your keywords with a hyphen. Obviously, everything should be consistent, HTTPS, and again, 301's single jump 301. Canonical tags. Canonical tags are a great tool for SEOs in general and an awesome tool for migrations. One of the key steps I do for migrations now is when I'm getting ready to move from one site to the other. Let's take the HTTP to HTTPS migration. That was pretty much flawless. We had maybe a week where we lost a little bit of traffic. It was because the way we ran that is we stood up the HTTPS version of the website first. Then once it was up and my IT folks were able to confirm everything's working perfectly as it should, I then changed the canonical tags for the entire site to point to the HTTPS version of the website. I then gave Google about a week or two. Depending on your website, you may need to give it a little more time, but I then gave Google a couple weeks to crawl all of our pages, the HTTP version. They saw the canonical tags and slowly started indexing the HTTPS on their own. After about, I think it was only 10 days, after about 10 days of that being out there, I then directed the staff to say, all right, now we can implement our 301s. Now you can do your site-wide 301 from HTTP to HTTPS. And once that was implemented, like I said, we had a very minor blip for a couple of days and everything was right back to where it was. And the key was we started giving Google a chance to see our new structure. I've done the same thing when we move from one directory to the other directory. So if we're moving from one site to another site or one directory to another directory, I will often set up a canonical tag pointing to the new version about a week before I set up my 301 redirects. And it seems to really kickstart the migration and it seems to make it go much smoother. So that's how I use canonical tags in migrations. Obviously, canonical tags are typically used to keep from having problems with duplicate content and site bloat and things like that. But I found the canonical tags are very, very helpful when migrating sites. One other little side note I'll give you, so folks that are aware of the hreflang, make sure your hreflang and your canonical tags agree. I have seen migrations have problems because the hreflang was pointing to a different URL than the canonical tag was. So you have to be very, very careful about that with migration. So one, I have found in general the hreflang seems to trump the canonical tag. So that's an interesting. I haven't run too many tests with that, but that's interesting thing to mess with. So bringing it all together, we're designing a site for SEO, simple navigation, keywords in your H1s, keywords in your copy. You're optimizing everything. You're making a site that users can use and that search engines can go through. Really, the last thing you have to worry about before your migration is make sure you have a custom 404 page set up. So I have kind of a fun GIF here for making a 404 page. Make sure it matches the feel of your website. If you're at a large, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 company, you're probably not going to have a 404 page like this. There's some real fun examples out there. You can just Google funny 404 pages and you'll find all kinds of great stuff. But you want to make sure it's useful for the user. And honestly, this example I have here, while it's fun, it's not really useful. If you were a user and you got to this page, this doesn't provide you a path to the rest of the website. And it certainly doesn't provide the search engine a path to the rest of the website. So you want to make sure that, number one, your 404 page is telling the user that, hey, the page doesn't exist. You've got to be very clear about that. I recommend providing search boxes. Users like doing internal site search. You should have a very limited site, maybe a site map, or at least your navigation, your header and footer. So do you see me and do you see my screen? And
Yeah, I can see you great.
okay. Okay, great. So I don't remember, I'm sorry, hopefully I wasn't yammering on too long before. I noticed pretty quickly that there was something going on with the connection. I'll just do a quick 1 minute recap of the 404. My point with the 404 is when you're going into a site migration, there will be some 404s, sometimes by design, sometimes by accident. Don't panic, it's not that big of a deal. You just want to make sure your 404 page is helpful for both the bots and the users. What do users need? Users need navigation. They need a search box, provide links, maybe have a limited sitemap on the page, or your links to homepage and top categories. Just make sure users and the search engines can find the most important pages from there. And so the good news about that, even though we had a little problems, is oh yeah, then I went on to our review. So get your SEO involved early. Make sure you find all your URLs, decide what you're going to do with each of them, use best practices when building a new site. A couple bonus migration tips, post-migration bonus tips for those of you that held on through our technical difficulties. You want to make sure you find and fix all your internal links. And that includes your XML sitemap and your robots.txt. Don't forget, if you're changing your directory structure, a lot of folks will sometimes forget about their robots.txt. So make sure you do that as well. If you have shortened URLs, you want to make or fix any shortened URLs. Sometimes some companies have their own URL shortener. Sometimes you have a bunch of bit.ly or some other kind of URL shortener. If you have a lot you use on a regular basis, go through and fix those if you can. Because remember, those are essentially a 301 redirect. And then the last and not the least is see how many of your internal links, your incoming your external links, I should say, the ones that pointing to you from other sites, how many of those can you fix? And that's something I've worked with Page One Power on, having them reach out to everybody that's linking to our site and say, hey, can you get them to fix these links? Because we don't want them going through 301s. We want the search bot hitting their page and going directly to our site. So those are a couple nice tips to think about. So really, here's the point of the thing where I just say, hey, ask me anything. Thanks a lot for listening. Sorry very much for the technical difficulties, but this is your point. I've been talking enough. You folks can feel free to ask questions. I did see a question pop up, Ben, about talking about types of 301 redirects. I didn't get a chance to read it because it was a little long.
Yeah.
If you can throw that at me, I'll be happy to address it.
Yeah, so it looks like we have a question here. It says 1-to-1 301 redirects, as mentioned, are best when doing a site revamp. What are your thoughts on doing regex redirects when you're not only changing your URL, but your attributes as well, with new attribute values are mapped out to the new URL structure?
Okay, so I've worked on a couple sites where we've done the larger regex, and when you say regex, I'm going to address a couple questions because you could be asking a couple different things here. But so first of all, as far as implementing the 301 redirect, there's a couple of levels to this question. As far as implementing the 301 redirects, it doesn't really matter how you implement them. Depending on how you want to implement, as long as the bot's seeing a 301 redirect, that's perfect. If you're not 100% sure what the bot is seeing, don't worry about it. We can test it. I'm a bit, if you've read any of my articles, I'm a big proponent of don't guess, test. I didn't make up this word, but someone likes to call it a guessio. You don't want to be a guessio. Just test it and see exactly what happens. So I would set up a 301 redirect. Use a tool. Again, Screaming Frog has a great log analyzer tool, but any log analyzer tool will work. Use a tool like Screaming Frog's log analyzer to see, are the bots actually getting a 301 redirect? If they are, you're good. Now, I've also worked in situations where folks have used so they've used regex rules to do like a wildcard rules. I don't have a problem with that, especially when you're just changing a directory or changing domains. The one dilemma that you can hit with wildcard rules, while they are very quick and easy to set up, I've been told, I'm not a server guy, but I've been told that they're a little heavy on server load, because every single request that comes in must be processed through this wildcard. So I've been told that that files with one-to-one redirects are better. Now, if you've got a huge site, though, I have trouble believing that a list of 20,000 URLs is less of a load for a server than a single redirect. But I don't know. I'm not a server person. So just talk to your server folks about that. Say what was going to have the least amount of load. Because, and here's a great point I hadn't mentioned. You want to leave these redirects up pretty much forever. So you don't really want to bring them down at any point. Until you can show using server logs that that no users and no search engines are hitting those old URLs. And I don't want to see any traffic to those URLs for a couple months straight. Hopefully that answered the question. If I didn't quite hit it, feel free to put it up in the chat, or follow up in the chat, or in the question. I'll be happy to dive deeper into that.
Awesome. But another question come in. It says, is there ever a not good enough reason for migration compared with the probable dip in traffic or the recovery period for SEO elements?
All right, I am really sorry about that. I'm going to blame Comcast. Darn you! Everybody in the world is online. So. So I'm sorry. So there was a question right before I disappeared, and I'll talk as fast as I can because who knows when I'm going to lose connection again. The question was about, is there a reason just to kind of migrating for the sake of migration, or is there ever a point where it's not worth migrating? I always say make sure there's a strong business reason to migrate. I don't like migrations for the sake of just making things look bad, like, oh, we really want to kind of change it, we don't really like this. No, I wouldn't recommend that because it's not worth the dip. We did at Verizon make some changes because we had product names in some of our URLs, and we made the decision that it doesn't make sense to have product names because products come and go, services stay the same. We're always going to do cell phone plans, but we may not always have iPhone. So that's maybe a bad example, but we did make some changes. But that was more of a branding reason. There was a specific business reason behind doing that. So I wouldn't change just because I think it's worth changing. I worked for a company once that had plus signs in their URLs, and the first thing I thought when I saw that is that doesn't make any sense. I don't think plus signs should be in URLs, and I would never build a site like that. But the site ranked just fine, and so I didn't see any reason to change. Why change what's working? If it's not broken, don't fix it.
So I was on mute there. All right,
Okay,
great.
I got scared. I thought I dropped again.
Not this time, thankfully. Knock on wood. Okay, so we got one more question popped in here. When everything is done properly, how often do you see traffic and leads dip when the initial migration is made?
So I would say if everything's done properly, you really shouldn't have a major dip, but I would plan, when you go into a migration, plan on a 4 to 6 month drop, and the drop at its worst, which is typically around end of month 2, middle of month 3, could be as much as 15, 20%. So that can happen. So just be prepared for a drop. But after 6 months, if you haven't recovered, then there's something fundamentally wrong with the migration. Google's still finding old URLs that aren't redirecting or something along those lines.
Awesome.
You should be recovering within about 3 months into them. After a migration happens, within 3 months, if you're not starting to move up steadily, you got a problem.
Awesome. We did have another question came in here through chat. Says, what are the first things I should check if traffic dips after a migration? Excellent
question. So what I would watch like a hawk, and I built out Data Studio reports for this, is I watch the impressions, the organic impressions. So this is Google Data Studio coming out of Google Search Console. I watch the impressions to the old URLs, and I have a chart. So on one side, I have a chart with the impressions to the old URLs, And on the other side, I have a chart with the impressions to the new URLs. I should see the impressions going down on the old URLs and the impressions going up on the new URLs. I have that chart fired up before the migration even happens. Once we implement our canonical tags, you'll start seeing the old go down and the new come up. Then once we do see the 301s, obviously that should really accelerate. So that's what I would do. If you're not watching that, or if you're already in something and you're like, uh-oh, I'm not seeing a lot of traffic come through, the first thing I would do is find out, all right, well, what old URLs are still getting traffic? I would check them. Google Search Console is a great tool. You may find that you've got URLs you didn't 301 redirect. So that would be the first thing that could be happening. You could also find that you're going through redirect chains. So Google's not indexing the new URL because it doesn't see it. It's too many hops away. You could have bad canonicals. I've seen canonicals point back to the original URL. So you basically 301 redirect from A to B, but then you're canonicling back again. The search engine's just going to stick with the old URL and it's not going to replace it, and you're going to keep getting traffic to the old stuff. I would also, in the Google Search Console, there's a great section that tells you errors. So it'll tell you often the errors you're getting. You can look at you can do an inspect of the URLs that are giving you trouble and see how Google is finding them. Look at your log files. Your server log files are a great insight to why Google is still grabbing old URLs. So I talked a little about the href-lang earlier on. I have found so canonical tag pointed to the correct URL. The href-lang pointed to a wrong URL. Google ignored the canonical and used the href-lang. So that's something else. That's a weird one. I've only seen it a couple times and it's worked. I've actually tested. I haven't gotten any conclusive results back. I tested using the href-lang in lieu of a canonical to see if that's a more powerful signal to the search engine. I've got a little mixed results. So I wouldn't go messing around with that. Just make sure it's not broken.
Awesome. So I have another question that came in here. If you're updating URLs, aesthetics, and copy, should you expect drops in traffic?
So if you're changing the URL structure and you're changing your copy, will you drop? You shouldn't, honestly. You shouldn't drop significantly. Again, anytime you're changing URL structures, you're going to see a little bit of a dip. Even in what I would call my almost perfect URL for the HTTP, HTTPS, where nothing changed, we still saw a 1-week drop. But it wasn't significant. If you're changing, that's a loaded question because how much are you changing your copy? If you're changing it a lot, Google might just say, hey, this is a new page in my mind, and it may reevaluate. So you're not only hitting a migration, the problem with Google indexing the new URL, but Google's now reanalyzing this content and could be re-ranking you. However, with that said, when I did our business migration, we did it much better. The old pages weren't optimized well. There were problems with the CMS system. So the new ones, we had better title tags, better H1s, better content in general, better internal linking, and that's what propelled us up. So my quick answer would be, if you are changing URL structure and you're changing copy, if your new copy is better optimized, you should see a gain in traffic. And I would encourage you to say, hey, yeah, if you can make your content better, your title tags better, whatever, you should see a gain through your migration. If you're 1 week in your migration, you see a 5% dip, don't panic. That's going to happen. That's completely natural. If you're 2 months into it and you see and you're still seeing like a 10% plus dip, then there's something wrong. Probably not even with your copy. This probably has something to do with how Google's finding your pages, or more importantly, not finding your pages, or doesn't understand you changed pages. It thinks you have 2 different websites out there now.
Awesome. And we have one other question here that's lined up. If you guys do have any additional questions, definitely make sure you pop them in right now before we kind of wrap this up. The last question that I have queued up for you here, Charles, what are key factors that go into decision making, whether to 301 a page or to delete it?
Good question. So it really boils down to, do you need this page? So sometimes it's obvious. My example with the support, we had a Netscape Navigator page. No one's searched. Actually, the funny thing is people were still searching Netscape Navigator for some strange reason, but it wasn't a page we needed to support, so it was a very easy kill. Now, sometimes what you may want to do, and this kind of goes back to our refreshing copy, You may not kill the page, you may want to consolidate pages, and we did a lot of that. So we used to have a page for every single router you could possibly have, every single modem you could possibly have, a troubleshooting guide for every single modem. We just made a consolidated pages for all of our routers, a consolidated pages for all of our modems. So we did in essence kill a bunch of pages, but we consolidated all the content to one master page, which made it a more helpful page for the users because they could jump around and they could jump around within the page. So that's often what we'll do. If you're not sure, if sometimes folks say, hey, do we need, I get this question, I still get this question, do we need to keep this page? Can we get rid of this page? I'll open up the traffic and see, does it get traffic? And is that traffic converting? If you're getting traffic, if you're getting leads and sales off of that page, you need to keep that page. We at Verizon, we still offer DSL, believe it or not. You can still buy it depending on where you live. Folks have been bugging me to kill that page long ago because it's old technology. And I can understand from a business standpoint, they don't want a page like that. But we still get traffic, we still get leads, and we still get sales off of that page. So in my book, that page stays.
Awesome. That was a great answer.
I think one of the things, with a lot of these questions, I just want to reiterate, the business should be defining what they want to do, and the SEO's job, it's my job as an SEO to just make sure they don't do it wrong. It's like going to the accountant and saying, how should I make money? No, it's your decision to figure out how you make money. It's the accountant's decision how to file that properly.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Well, cool. I think that about wraps it up. I know it was a little touch and go there a little bit with the connections. We appreciate you guys hanging in there with us. I had a great time getting to learn kind of your do's and don'ts of site migration. And I think it's interesting to see your perspective as well. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this with us. Appreciate you guys tuning in and sticking around. If you guys have any additional questions for Page One Power or for Charles Taylor, be sure to hit us up online through social media. Or you can visit our website, pageonepower.com. We hope you guys will tune in next week. We have a great lineup ahead of us. If you guys have anything else that you would like us to do as far as any topic ideas or guest ideas, definitely let us know as well. Again, Charles, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. See you guys. Stay safe.